Out of the many focus areas that a project manager is expected to integrate, stakeholder expectation management is one of them, right? And obviously the starting point when it comes to any stakeholder exercise is to first understand your stakeholders, right? And you need to then have a full appreciation of the composition of your stakeholders. Who are your stakeholders? Then you can identify stakeholders, then analyze them so that you can understand their needs and expectations. And from that exercise, you get to understand their attitudes, so whether this one is resisting, whether they are more supportive, like positive or negative stakeholders. So if you want to simplify it like that. And then of course, you also want to establish the power and interest levels, right? So that you can come up with a stakeholder map, which will help you to properly organize them, right? So that you can organize your stakeholder intervention efforts, managing some closely, keeping some satisfied, keeping others informed, things like that. And that was just the one tool and technique that can be very useful when it comes to stakeholder engagement activities. There is also another one, which is, the stakeholder, assessment matrix, right? So with the stakeholder assessment matrix, it helps one to then formalize the stakeholder engagement actions, right? So that you can then know exactly what you're going to do to manage the expectations of each and every stakeholder, right? For instance, if I've identified a stakeholder, right, and I've established that the current state of the stakeholder is resisting, right, and therefore I want to make sure that I increase the level of support and reduce any form of resistance in my project. So I need to then understand what will then be the future desired end state and how long is that going to take, what will be the interventions, and who will be the stakeholder owner and who will be the task owner that will be actioning all of those stakeholder interventions. And lastly, if we were to just map the stakeholder engagement activities, so in line with the project life cycle. So when we initiate our project, we first identify our stakeholders, right? So that we can have a stakeholder register that helps us to understand the characteristics of these stakeholders, needs and expectations, just the basic information, contact information, the attitudes and so forth. Then we analyze that. Then, that helps us to then come up with a stakeholder map that, is then further unpacked in our stakeholder engagement plan, right? So which will capture the interventions of how we're going to deal with any stakeholder issues, a strategy for dealing with stakeholders. Then, once we then move to execution, then we're going to implement that plan, right? Because we've got stakeholder owners and action owners, implementation dates and so forth, and which will then be tracked, and then we're going to adjust as we go, as the environment changes. So in a nutshell, when it comes to, the stakeholder engagement activities in the project, it doesn't matter whether you have the best systems or just basic systems, but one thing that at least you need to do is to make sure that at least you understand your stakeholders and you have some form of system of how you're going to deal with the different stakeholder groups. Because if you think you can just ignore them, ignore those expectations, then you're going to find yourself in a very compromising position, right? So you don't want to be caught flat-footed. Be proactive. Project management is about being proactive, right? So you must anticipate all the things that are likely to materialize so that you can come up with plans and prioritize your efforts based on the power and interest levels of the stakeholders. So your stakeholder map will provide that kind of guidance. You will know who's more important, who requires most of your utilization hours, so that you can effectively manage the project objectives.